fell in steady sheets, blurring the yellow lines on the lonely stretch of highway. Judge Emmanuel Carter tightened his grip on the wheel, his leather briefcase resting on the seat beside him. He had just left the courthouse after a long day of rulings that weighed on his conscience, decisions that would ripple through lives he'd never fully know. Justice was never clean. It was always stained with compromise. Blue and red lights flared behind him. For a moment, he thought it wasn't real, just a reflection of a neon sign in the wet glass. But then the siren wailed, sharp and commanding, tearing through the quiet night. He pulled over, easing his car onto the shoulder. His heart wasn't racing. Yet, after all, he had done nothing wrong. His tags were current, his speed steady, his record spotless. He was a judge, a man of the law. Surely this would be routine. But somewhere in his gut, an old warning stirred. He had lived long enough to know that routine meant one thing for some, and something else entirely for men like him. The patrol car door slammed shut. Footsteps crunched against gravel. The beam of a flashlight cut through the rain, harsh and deliberate, sweeping across his rear window like a searchlight hunting prey. Judge Carter rolled down his window halfway, keeping his hands visible on the wheel. He knew the drill too well. The officer approached, his outline growing clearer under the rain-smeared glow. Broad shoulders, hand resting on his holstered weapon, a sneer already carved into his face, as though he had decided who Emmanuel was before even seeing him. License and registration. The cop barked, his tone sharp, stripped of courtesy. No, sir. No explanation for the stop. Just raw authority. Yes, officer, Carter replied evenly, reaching slowly for his wallet. His voice carried calm, but inside, something coiled tight. The flashlight beam stabbed his face. The officer leaned closer, studying him. Then, with a smirk that cut colder than the rain, he said, "Didn't expect to find someone like you in a car like this." Carter froze. He knew the implication. The expensive car, the tailored suit. It didn't fit the story this officer had already written in his mind. He handed over his license, steady and deliberate. The officer snatched it, glancing at the name. His brow furrowed. "Judge Carter, huh?" he muttered, his voice dripping with disbelief. "Well, let's see how high the law sits when you're out here on my road." The words hit like a slap. Carter inhaled, steadying himself. He had faced defendants who spat curses at him, lawyers who challenged his every decision, even threats in the mail after controversial rulings. But never had he felt so small, so deliberately diminished, as in that moment. The rain beat harder against the car, drowning the silence that stretched between them. The officer's hand still lingered near his weapon, and Carter realized this was no routine stop. The rain drummed harder on the roof, a relentless percussion that matched the pounding in Judge Carter's chest. The officer studied his license as if it were a forgery, flipping it back and forth under the beam of his flashlight. "You say you're a judge," the officer finally said, his tone laced with mockery. "But out here, titles don't mean a damn thing. You're just another man behind the wheel." Carter swallowed his anger. He knew that showing it would be gasoline on the fire. He kept his voice calm, low, measured. "Is there a reason you pulled me over, officer?" The cop smirked, leaning down until his face hovered inches from the window. The sour stench of coffee and cigarettes mixed with rain. "Reason? You swerved back there. Could have been drunk. Or maybe you're carrying something you shouldn't." Carter's grip tightened on the wheel. "I wasn't swerving, and I haven't been drinking. My record is clean. If you like, you can run my plates." But the officer wasn't listening. He circled the car slowly, his flashlight beam crawling over the polished surface like an accusation. When he reached the trunk, he tapped it with the side of his fist. "Pop it," he ordered. Carter's stomach clenched. "Excuse me? You heard me. Open the trunk, unless you've got something to hide." The judge exhaled slowly, forcing his tone to remain even. "Unless you're a probable cause, I don't have to comply with that request." The cop froze, then turned back toward the driver's side window. His lips curled into a cold grin. "Oh, we got a lawyer here too? Or maybe you think you're above the law, Your Honor." The way he spit the words, "Your Honor," was heavy with venom, as if the title itself was an insult. The officer stepped closer, his hand resting on the top of the door, his presence suffocating. "Step out of the vehicle." Carter's pulse quickened. He knew this command. He knew the risks. Complying could mean humiliation, danger, even violence. Refusing could mean escalation. He unbuckled his seatbelt slowly, every movement deliberate, praying his composure would hold. He opened the door, stepping out into the rain. The cold hit him instantly, soaking his suit, chilling him to the bone. The officer looked him up and down, eyes narrowing. "Nice suit. Must be nice to play a king in the courthouse, while people like me do the real work on the street." Carter met his gaze, unflinching. "The law applies to us both, officer." The cop chuckled darkly. "We'll see about that." He gestured toward the hood of the car. "Hands where I can see them." Carter hesitated for just a beat too long, his pride resisting. The officer's smirk vanished, replaced by something sharper, more dangerous. And in that instant, Carter realized this wasn't about a stop. It wasn't about the car, the road, or even the law. It was about breaking him. The cold rain soaked through Judge Carter's tailored suit, plastering the fabric to his skin. He stood by the hood of his car, hands spread wide, his breath misting in the night air. The wet gravel bit into his shoes, grounding him in a moment that felt both unreal and all too familiar. The officer circled behind him. The click of his boots on the pavement was slow, deliberate, like a predator savoring the fear of its prey. "Spread your legs," he barked. Carter inhaled, chest rise with controlled anger. He obeyed, the wet fabric of his trousers clinging uncomfortably. The officer's hands began to pat him down, rough, invasive, without a trace of professionalism. "You judges think you're untouchable." The cop muttered as his hands pressed into Carter's sides, his pockets, even lingering too long near his waistband. "But out here you're nothing." Carter clenched his jaw. His instinct was to fight, to pull away, to shout that this was unlawful, that this was harassment. But he knew too well how quickly defiance could be twisted into justification. The officer laughed under his breath. "Quiet, huh? That's smart. Most of your kind don't know when to shut up." The words cut deeper than the rain's chill. "Your kind." Carter's mind flickered with memories. His father pulled over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. His brother frisked outside his own apartment. His own son warned to keep both hands on the wheel no matter what. Generations reduced to caution and survival in the face of a badge. But this was different. This wasn't just survival. This was an assault on his very dignity. The officer yanked open the briefcase on the passenger seat, scattering papers onto the wet ground. Court documents, transcripts, legal briefs, all drenched instantly, ink bleeding into illegible stains. "Careful!" Carter shouted before he could stop himself. The cop turned, his eyes narrowing, his face inches from Carter's. "What was that?" Carter forced his tone back into control, though his voice trembled with rage. "Those are official documents. You had no right." The officer shoved him lightly against the hood. Not enough to injure, just enough to remind him who held the power. "No right?" The cop's laugh was low, cruel. "Out here, I decide what's right." For the first time that night, Carter let his anger show. He lifted his head, meeting the officer's glare with a steady, unflinching stare. His voice was low, firm, carrying the weight of years in courtroom. "You may wear the badge," he said slowly, "but you are not the law." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The officer's smirk vanished. His jaw tightened. His hand inched closer to his weapon. The rain fell harder, thunder rolling in the distance. Carter realized he had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The night air thickened with tension, every raindrop hitting the hood like a ticking clock. Judge Carter stood firm, though the officer's stare burned into him with unmasked hostility. "You think you're clever, don't you?" the officer growled, his voice low and simmering. "Throwing your title around, acting like you're above me." Carter didn't move, didn't flinch. His silence was its own defiance. The officer's hand hovered near his holster, fingers tapping the weapon as though deciding how far to push. The flashlight beam still cut across Carter's face, blinding and accusatory. "Let me tell you something," the officer said. stepping closer, his voice rising above the rain. "When I stop someone like you out here, there's no courtroom, no jury, no cameras. Just me deciding how this ends." Carter felt the weight of those words press against his chest. He knew men who never made it home after stops like this. He knew their names, their families, their unfinished stories. And for the first time that night, the thought pierced his mind. What if I become one of them? The officer leaned in, so close Carter could see the raindrops on his eyelashes. "Now get on your knees." The command landed like a blow. Carter's heart pounded. He was a man who had spent decades commanding respect in courtrooms, who had spoken justice into existence from the bench. To kneel before this man on the wet pavement would not only strip his dignity, but send a message. That power like this would crush anyone, even a judge. His fists clenched at his sides. He could feel anger clawing at the edges of his restraint, threatening to spill over. "I will not," he said finally, his voice calm but ironclad. The officer's eyes darkened. His jaw flexed. The smirk returned, sharper, more dangerous. Wrong answer. He reached for his radio, muttering into it, though the words were muffled by the rain. Backup. He was calling for backup. Carter's stomach turned cold. This was no longer about intimidation. It was about escalation, and he knew what would happen when more patrol cars arrived. Outnumbered, surrounded, his word against theirs. The officer stepped back, pulling his baton from his belt with a metallic snap. "Guess we'll do this the hard way." Carter stood tall, every fiber in him trembling between fear and fury. The rain poured down, soaking both men, blurring the edges of the world. In that moment, something shifted inside him, a realization. He could no longer stand silent. He was not just a target on the roadside. He was Judge Emmanuel Carter. And if he didn't fight, if not for himself, then for every man who had been forced to kneel before power abused, then his silence would echo louder than any ruling he had ever made. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the officer's raised baton, and Carter knew the next moment would change everything. The rain came down in sheets, drumming against the hood, drowning the silence that stretched between them. The officer's baton gleamed under the flashing lights, raised high, trembling with the intent of violence. Judge Carter braced himself, every nerve taut, his body refusing to bend. He had faced hostile attorneys, enraged defendants, and angry mobs, but never this. Never the raw threat of a weapon raised against him for nothing more than standing his ground. The baton came down. Instinct took over. Carter shifted just enough of the blow to glance off his shoulder instead of his head. Pain shot down his arm, sharp and searing, but he refused to fall. His knees trembled, yet his pride held him upright. The officer snarled, "Get down!" But Carter didn't. He looked him dead in the eye, rain streaming down his face, his voice steady despite the pain. "I will not." The defiance ignited something darker in the officer. With a roar, he swung again. This time Carter stepped back, the baton slicing the air inches from his chest. And then headlights. Two cars pulled up at the edge of the road. Doors opened. Figures stepped out. For a brief second, Carter feared the worst. That backup had arrived. That more uniforms would flood the scene, multiply his peril. But as the beams cut through the storm, his eyes caught a familiar figure. A woman in a trench coat, moving fast, her heels splashing through puddles. "Judge Carter," she called out, her voice carrying through the rain. The officer froze mid-swing, caught off guard. His baton hovered in the air, his authority suddenly fractured by the presence of witnesses. The woman drew closer, pulling a badge from her coat pocket, flashing it under the beam of his flashlight. "Department of Justice," she snapped. "Put that baton down now." The officer's face went pale. His smirk evaporated. Carter exhaled sharply, relief and disbelief colliding in his chest. He knew her, Assistant U.S. Attorney Naomi Price. She had appeared in his courtroom just weeks earlier, fierce and unyielding in her arguments. And now, by some twist of fate, she was here, standing between him and the officer's rage. Naomi stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You're assaulting a sitting judge. Do you have any idea what that means?" The officer stammered, lowering the baton but not releasing it. His confidence wavered, but pride held his grip. He resisted. He refused to comply. Enough! Naomi's voice was sharp, slicing through his excuses. She turned to Carter. Are you hurt? Carter straightened, hiding the pain radiating from his shoulder. I'll live. But inside, he knew this moment was far from over. The damage wasn't just to his body. It was deeper, etched into the very fabric of trust between the law and those meant to uphold it. Naomi's presence had shifted the power, but the storm was still raging. And in Carter's heart, one question burned. Would this night end in justice, or in cover-up? The wail of another siren cut through the storm, sharp and merciless. Judge Carter's relief at Naomi's sudden arrival faltered as fresh blue and red lights splashed across the wet asphalt. A second patrol car screeched to a halt. Two officers jumped out, their hands already hovering near their holsters, eyes scanning the scene. What's going on here? One of them barked, his tone hostile, suspicious. Naomi Price stepped forward, holding her badge high, rain dripping from her trench coat. Assistant U.S. Attorney. This man is Judge Emmanuel Carter. He was assaulted during a stop without cause. The two officers exchanged quick glances, then shifted their gaze to Carter. Their faces didn't soften. If anything, their expressions hardened, as though Naomi's words had only complicated things. The first officer, the one who had swung the baton, found his voice again. They don't know what they're talking about. The judge was resisting. I had to use force to maintain control. Naomi's eyes flared. Resisting? He stood still while you rifled through his documents and tried to put him on his knees. That's not resisting. That's refusing to be humiliated. Carter felt his throat tighten. Her words gave life to the fury he had buried under layers of control. But the backup officers weren't looking at Naomi anymore. They were circling Carter, studying him with eyes that weighed him not as a victim, not as a judge, but as a threat. One of them muttered, "If he really is a judge, let's verify." The first officer jumped on the chance. Exactly. Run his license. Let's make sure he's not lying. Naomi turned on them, fire in her voice. I told you who he is. You're about to dig yourselves into a hole you can't climb out of. But the officers ignored her, radioing in Carter's license plate and ID. The rain poured harder, muffling the words, leaving Carter standing in the middle of it all, soaked, bruised, and humiliated. Minutes crawled by like hours until the crackle of the radio finally answered. Confirmed. Emmanuel Carter, State Supreme Court Judge. The words landed heavy. Even through the veil of rain, Carter saw it. The flicker of fear, the stiffening of posture, the sudden silence among the officers. But fear didn't bring apology. It brought calculation. The first officer tucked his baton away, his face tightening with forced composure. Misunderstanding, he muttered, too low for anyone but Carter and Naomi to hear. Naomi stepped closer, her voice cutting like a blade. You call this a misunderstanding? You put a baton to a judge's head. The officer didn't answer. He stared past her, toward the other cops, his expression unreadable. And in that silence, Carter understood the truth. They weren't scrambling because they'd wronged him. They were scrambling to protect themselves. Because in their eyes, justice wasn't about truth. It was about survival. And that realization chilled him deeper than the storm. The storm had quieted to a steady drizzle, but the tension on that roadside was deafening. The officers huddled near their cars, their voices low, sharp, conspiratorial. Every so often, their eyes flicked toward Carter and Naomi, then quickly away. Judge Carter leaned against his car, his shoulder throbbing from the baton strike. His briefcase still lay on the ground, papers scattered, their ink smudged into illegible shadows. The sight twisted his stomach more than the pain in his arm. His work, his dignity, both trampled and bleeding into the mud. Naomi stood beside him, her jaw tight, her eyes never leaving the officers. They're already building their story, she murmured. They'll write it up as noncompliance. Say you resisted. Say I interfered. They'll do whatever it takes to protect themselves. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. He had heard hundreds of testimonies in his courtroom, stories that bent under pressure, accounts tailored to avoid blame. But this, seeing it unfold in real time, was different. It was raw. It was naked. The first officer finally turned back toward them, his face a mask of cold professionalism. "Judge Carter," he said, his voice carefully measured now, stripped of the venom from earlier. "It appears we've had a miscommunication. No harm intended." Naomi scoffed. "No harm? He's bleeding under that suit. You swung at him like he was a criminal in an alley." The officer's eyes narrowed slightly, though his expression never cracked. "Miss Price, with all due respect, this isn't the courtroom. You don't get to grandstand out here." Naomi stepped forward, closing the space between them. "And you don't get to rewrite reality. I saw everything." The backup officers shifted uneasily. One of them muttered, "Maybe we should just let this go." But the first officer shook his head. "If word gets out that we assaulted a judge, do you know what that does to this department? To our careers?" Carter finally spoke, his voice low, heavy with the authority he carried inside courtrooms, but tempered with something sharper now: betrayal. "You're not worried about what this does to the law. You're worried about what it does to you." The words cut through the rain like a gavel striking wood. The officer stiffened, his jaw clenching, but he didn't deny it. Naomi folded her arms, her voice steady. "You can try to cover this up. You can falsify reports, twist the narrative, call this a miscommunication. But remember this, truth has a way of surfacing, and when it does, it doesn't just drown reputations, it destroys them." The officer's eyes flicked to the dash cam on his patrol car, then back to Naomi. For the first time, uncertainty cracked his mask. Carter followed his gaze, a spark of hope igniting beneath the weight of anger. If that dash cam had been running, the truth wasn't lost. It was recorded, but would they ever let it see the light of day? The drizzle softened to a mist, but the air between them was sharp as glass. Judge Carter followed the officer's glance at the patrol car dash cam, its small black eye still glowing faintly in the rain. "The footage," Carter said, his voice firm despite the ache in his shoulder. "Play it back. Right here. Right now." The officer's jaw tightened. He shook his head. "That's not how this works, Judge. Footage has to be processed, logged, entered into evidence. You'll see if a complaint is filed." Naomi stepped forward, her heels sinking into the wet gravel. "In other words, you'll bury it before it ever sees daylight." The backup officers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them looked away, his posture faltering, but the first officer's stance hardened. "The dash cam malfunctioned earlier. It's not reliable." Carter's eyes narrowed. "Convenient." Naomi's voice cut like a blade. "You're lying. And if you try to erase it, I'll make sure every federal oversight committee knows exactly what happened here tonight." For the first time, the officer's mask cracked. His eyes flickered, not with fear, but with calculation. He wasn't backing down. He was buying time. Carter felt a surge of fury rise in him. All his years of serving the law, of believing in its power to hold truth above corruption, felt suddenly like glass shattering around him. He stepped closer, his tall frame casting a shadow even under the flashing lights. "You think this ends with a falsified report?" His voice was steady, cold. "I've sentenced men for less. I've seen careers crumble under perjury, reputations shredded by lies that couldn't hold. If you think you can bury this night, you're not just underestimating me. You're underestimating the very system you've sworn to serve." The officer's lips twitched, but he said nothing. Naomi crossed her arms, her voice softer now, almost a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the night. "Do you really want to gamble your badge on the hope that no one finds that footage?" Silence. Heavy, suffocating. The rain tapered off completely, leaving only the hum of engines and the echo of their words hanging in the damp air. Finally, one of the backup officers spoke, his voice hesitant. "Maybe we should show them, just to clear this up." The first officer turned on him, eyes blazing. Not a word. Carter watched the exchange, something dawning on him. The thin cracks were widening. The truth wasn't just in the footage. It was in the silence of men too afraid to speak, in the fear behind their eyes. And in that moment, Carter knew, exposing this wouldn't just be about a video. It would be about breaking the code of silence that had protected men like this for far too long. But codes don't break easily, and the storm was far from over. The next morning, the courthouse walls felt colder than usual. Judge Carter sat in his chambers, his arms stiff beneath the bandage, his suit freshly pressed but his spirit restless. He had spent his life inside these walls, believing they were a fortress of justice. Now they felt like stone masks hiding rot. Across from him sat Naomi Price, her trench coat draped over a chair, her eyes sharp, restless, unyielding. She had been awake all night, drafting reports, making calls, gathering every scrap of protocol that could trap the officers in their own lies. "They'll try to smother this before it breathes," she said flatly, flipping through her notes. "Internal affairs, the department, even a union. They'll circle wagons, rewrite timelines, scrub footage. If we want the truth to survive, we have to move faster than they do." Carter exhaled, the weight of her words pressing into him. He had always been the arbiter, the one others came to for judgment. Now he was the one seeking justice, and the irony burned deep. "They called it a misunderstanding," he said bitterly. "A baton to the head is not a misunderstanding. It's an assault." Naomi's voice softened, but the steel in it remained. "You're not just a victim, Judge. You're a symbol. If they can do this to you, a sitting Supreme Court judge, what hope does a young man on the street have?" Carter's jaw tightened. He thought of his son, of every warning he'd given him about surviving encounters with the police. The thought that his child might one day face what he'd faced was unbearable. "Then we fight," Carter said, his voice steadier now, a fire lighting in his chest. "Not just for me. For every name I've read in headlines. For every case file I've signed where justice came too late." Naomi nodded once, then leaned forward. "First, we subpoena the dash cam. If they tamper with it, that's obstruction. Then we bring in federal oversight, Justice Department monitors, civil rights investigators. We don't just fight in courts. We fight in the light." Carter looked at her, admiration flickering beneath his weariness. She was relentless, fearless, a mirror of what he once believed the system could be. But a shadow crossed his thoughts. He knew how deep the silence ran in law enforcement. He knew the favors owed, the alliances formed, the careers built on looking the other way. "This won't just be a case," he said quietly. "It will be a war." Naomi held his gaze. "Then we prepare for war." The knock on the chamber door startled them both. A clerk entered, pale and hesitant, clutching an envelope. "Judge Carter," the clerk said softly. "This just arrived for you. No sender listed." Carter took the envelope, his fingers heavy with dread. He tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words scrawled in thick black ink, "Drop it or else." The threat burned into his hands, darker than the storm the night before. And in that instant he realized the roadside was only the beginning. The words on the page seemed to pulse in Judge Carter's hands. Drop it or else. He had seen threats before, angry letters from convicts, veiled warnings from politicians. Anonymous notes slid under courthouse doors. But this was different. This wasn't just about him. This was about silencing truth before it could shatter the walls of power. Naomi snatched the paper from his hand, her eyes blazing. "This proves we're hitting a nerve. They're scared. That means we're winning." Carter leaned back in his chair, the weight of exhaustion pressing into his bones. "Or it means they're willing to go further than we are, willing to do things we can't." Naomi slammed the paper down on his desk, her voice sharp with urgency. "Then we don't back down. You of all people know, justice doesn't survive when good men bow to fear." Her words struck him hard. He thought of his oath, of the robe he wore each day, of the countless lives shaped by his rulings. He thought of his father's warnings, his son's cautious eyes, the baton raised above his head in the rain. And in that storm of memory, his fear began to harden into resolve. By afternoon, Naomi had filed motions with federal court, demanding preservation of the dashcam footage and an independent investigation. The news spread quickly, headlines buzzing with whispers of a judge assaulted by police, speculation swirling, pressure mounting. By evening, the footage surfaced. Not willingly, not freely, but leaked. Grainy rain streak, but clear enough. The officer's sneer, The raised baton, Carter's refusal to kneel, Naomi's intervention. It spread like wildfire. The city erupted. Protests bloomed on courthouse steps. Voices filled the air, chanting his name, demanding accountability. The system that once felt like stone walls now trembled under the weight of truth. The officer was suspended. Internal affairs scrambled. Politicians rushed to microphones with words of outrage, their faces pale with the urgency of survival. But for Carter, justice wasn't in the suspension or the speeches. It was in the faces of those who saw the video and recognized themselves in him. Young men who had been stopped and silenced. Mothers who had buried sons. Fathers who had swallowed their pride to live another day. One evening, standing at his window as the city roared outside, Carter's son came to him. "Dad," he said quietly, "you didn't kneel." Carter turned, his throat tight. "No," he whispered, "I didn't." And in that moment, he knew the true weight of what had happened. He hadn't just offended himself. He had shown the world that dignity could stand, even in the rain, even against a baton, even when the system tried to break it. The war wasn't over. The threats would come again. The silence would fight to close around the truth. But Judge Emmanuel Carter would not kneel. Not now. Not ever. The end. They thought she was powerless. Just another black woman to be silenced, cornered, humiliated. But they didn't know the blood that ran in her veins, or the secret she carried. When Officer Miller barked his command, demanding obedience, she gave him silence. And when he crossed the line, she gave him something he would never forget. This wasn't just a traffic stop. It was the unraveling of a system built on fear, lies, and control. And she was about to light the fuse. Before we go further, kindly hit the subscribe button. This will enable us to be giving you more exiting stories. The night was thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and makes the air itself feel suspicious. The city pulsed in the distance, red and blue flickers bouncing off brick walls, street lamps hissing above a nearly empty boulevard. And then came the sound, a siren, short, sharp, commanding. The black sedan slowed. Its tinted windows reflected the glare of the cruiser behind it. Inside sat a woman, poised motionless, her hands folded neatly on the steering wheel. Her orange suit looked out of place in the darkness, like fire daring to exist in the night. The cruiser door slammed. Heavy boots crunched against gravel. Officer Miller approached with the swagger of a man who believed the world bent under his badge. His flashlight beam slashed through the glass, cutting across her cheekbone, her lips, her silence. License and registration. His voice wasn't a request. It was a dare. She handed over her papers with measured calm, eyes steady, jaw unshaken. Miller skimmed them, then smirked. CIA driver? What the hell is this supposed to mean? He tossed the credentials onto the hood as though they were worthless scraps. No response. She stayed still, her hands visible, her breath controlled. Silence was her armor. That silence enraged him. "You don't belong here," Miller snapped, stepping closer, his shadow swallowing her frame. "Get out of the car." She obeyed, slow and deliberate, like a chess piece sliding across a board. The city's night air wrapped around her shoulders as she stepped into the harsh glare of the cruiser lights. Her orange suit glowed against the darkness, an unmissable target. Miller circled her, like a predator who had already claimed to kill. His hands patted her down with unnecessary force, his words sharp enough to cut. "What's this? Some kind of costume? Say, huh? You think this badge protects you? Out here, it's my street." The other officers chuckled from the cruiser, their laughter hollow and cruel. She didn't flinch. Not once. Then Miller leaned close, his breath hot, his words venom. "On your knees." For the first time, her eyes flickered, not fear, but warning. A storm gathering behind calm waters. She slowly straightened her shoulders, and the night seemed to pause with her. Miller mistook her silence for weakness. He pushed harder. "Did you hear me? On your..." And then, without a word, she moved. It was fast, precise, a blur of orange slicing through blue light. One step, one pivot, one strike. Miller's body crumpled to the ground with a sickening thud, the breath torn from his chest, his authority shattered in an instant. The laughter from the cruiser stopped cold. Silence roared louder than any siren. She stood above him, her shadow cast long and unbroken. Her voice finally broke the night, calm and low, carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. You should have listened. But before the words could settle, another sound cut through the night, the click of a safety being released. The other officers were stepping out of the car, guns drawn. She had dropped Miller with a single strike, but now 3 barrels were aimed directly at her chest. The night froze. 3 black barrels stared her down, each one trembling slightly in a hand of officers who suddenly realized the script had changed. Their authority, their laughter, their control, it was all bleeding on the ground beside Officer Miller, who groaned faintly, clutching his ribs. "Hands where I can see them," one of them barked, his voice cracking between fear and fury. She raised her hands slowly, palms open, her breath steady. But her eyes, they were unyielding, 2 flames burning against a neon wash of red and blue. On the ground, "Now!" another officer shouted. The command echoed off the silent storefronts, bouncing back hollow and fragile. She didn't move, not an inch. Instead, she spoke, low, controlled, every syllable laced with warning. "You don't know what you're doing." That sentence, it unsettled them more than defiance ever could, because in the pit of their instincts, they knew she was right. Something about her stance, her composure, the way she didn't shake or beg. It didn't match the narrative they'd written for her in their heads. But fear is a dangerous author. Last chance. The tallest officer, badge gleaming under the strobe lights, stepped closer, his finger twitching on the trigger. And then, from the shadows, another car door creaked open. It wasn't hers. It wasn't theirs. A black SUV, parked across the street, hummed to life. Its engine purred like a predator waking from slumber. Dark-tinted windows rolled down just enough for the barrel of a rifle to kiss the night air. The officers hesitated. Their aim wavered. The woman in orange didn't blink. A voice, calm, metallic, amplified by a speaker, spilled out from the SUV. "Stand down. She's not yours." The officers glanced at each other. Confusion etched across their faces. Sweat dripped down temples, uncertainty dripping faster. Their world was controlled, but control was slipping. "Who the hell are you?" the tall one yelled toward the SUV. The voice ignored him, speaking only to her. "Agent Marlowe. Extraction wasn't supposed to be public. You forced our hand." Her jaw clenched. A muscle in her cheek tightened. The word struck her harder than any command. Extraction. Public. Too soon. She whispered, almost to herself, "You weren't supposed to be here." The SUV's headlights flared, blinding, swallowing the street in harsh white. And in that moment of chaos, she moved, faster than their eyes could track. A roll, a strike, and the tallest officer's gun clattered against the pavement. The other 2 stumbled back, shouting, but she was already behind cover, her silhouette vanishing into the SUV's glow. "Agent Marlowe," the voice repeated, colder now. "You've compromised everything." And then tires screamed. The SUV lurched forward, swallowing her in its steel belly, leaving the officers behind in a cloud of exhaust, confusion, and rage. Officer Miller coughed on the ground, struggling to rise, his voice hoarse and broken. She wasn't supposed to fight back. The SUV disappeared into the night, but inside its dark interior, Agent Marlowe's fight was only beginning, because the people who had just rescued her were not the ones she trusted. Trapped inside the SUV, Marlowe realized her rescuers were not allies, but something far more dangerous. The doors locked with a heavy clunk, sealing her inside. The SUV's windows were pitch black from within, the city outside vanishing into shadows. Only the soft hum of the engine and the faint click of the locks reminded her she was moving and not in control. Agent Marlowe sat rigid, her orange suit glowing faintly under the low interior lights. Across from her, 2 men in dark suits sat like statues. They didn't look at her. They didn't need to. their posture, their silence, told her everything. They were watchers, not rescuers. The driver spoke, his voice carrying through the intercom. "Sit still, Agent. You'll be briefed when necessary." Briefed, the word curled around her like smoke. CIA agents didn't get briefed in moving cages unless something had gone horribly wrong. "Where's Director Hayes?" she asked, her tone clip controlled. No reply. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You're not agency." The man to her left finally moved, just a slight turn of his head, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice smooth as glass, he answered, "Agency. Division. Call it what you want. Labels are for people who need comfort." Marlowe's stomach sank. That wasn't protocol. That wasn't family. That was something else. Something buried in the cracks between the agency's official walls. Her mind raced. She had trained for abductions, for hostile extractions, but nothing had prepared her for being rescued by ghosts who spoke in riddles. She steadied her breath, controlled the fear, controlled the silence. That was survival. The SUV cut through the city, turning onto roads she didn't recognize. Not toward Langley, not toward any safe house. These were back routes, industrial, deserted, the kind of streets chosen for people who were never meant to be seen again. Finally, the vehicle slowed. It rolled to stop beneath an overpass, the concrete above dripping with rainwater, graffiti bleeding across the pillars. The hum of the city was distant here, swallowed by shadows. The locks clicked again. The man beside her gestured. "Out!" Marlowe didn't move. "Where are you taking me?" The man's lips curved into something that wasn't a smile. "You'll see." The driver's door opened and footsteps echoed against wet concrete. From the front of the SUV emerged a figure she recognized instantly, though she wished she hadn't. Tall, sharp, eyes like winter steel. Agent Rourke, once her partner, once her friend, the man who'd saved her life in Damascus, who'd vanished 3 years ago without a trace, declared dead. Yet here he was, alive, stepping out of shadows with betrayal written in every line of his face. "Marlowe," Rourke said, his voice calm, cold, final. "You should never have come back." The partner she once trusted now stood before her alive, dangerous, and holding secrets that could shatter everything she thought she knew. The SUV's interior hummed with the low growl of its engine, but inside, the silence was suffocating. Marlowe sat between the two suited men, her wrists bound with a thin strip of flex cuff that bit into her skin. Rourke occupied the passenger seat, his profile sharp against the glow of the dashboard. Every so often, his eyes flicked to the side mirror, scanning the shadows that trailed him. It wasn't paranoia, it was habit. Marlowe remembered that about him. He never stopped calculating. Finally, he broke the silence. "You know why Miller stopped you?" Her jaw tightened. "Because he thought he could." A humorless chuckle slipped from Rourke's lips. "Not quite. Miller wasn't acting alone. He was fed your plate number. Someone wanted you pulled over, wanted the situation to escalate. He was just the leash. You were the bait." The word sank deep, colder than the cuffs around her wrists. "Bait for what?" Rourke turned, his eyes locking with hers. "For me." The SUV jolted slightly as the driver hit a pothole, but Marlowe barely felt it. Her heart hammered too loud. "You let them use me to drag you out?" Rourke's face hardened. "I didn't let them. They're already 5 steps ahead. They always are. That's why I had to disappear." Her voice cracked, the first fissure in her composure. "Disappear and let me believe you were dead?" The silence that followed was heavy, a silence that reeked of guilt. Rourke finally exhaled, slow, controlled. "If you'd known the truth, you'd be in the ground with me." The driver spoke up for the first time, his voice flat. 5 minutes. Rourke nodded but didn't break her gaze. "Marlowe, the agency you serve, it doesn't exist the way you think. There's a shadow division, older than Langley itself, buried under redactions and sealed directives. They decide who lives, who dies, which wars are fought, and which lies keep the world spinning. I crossed them once. That's why I vanished." Her throat went dry. She'd heard rumors, whispers in classified briefings, files that ended in abrupt black bars. She thought they were myths, scare tactics to keep agents in line. But Rourke's eyes told her they weren't myths. They were chains. "You're saying Miller was their pawn," she said quietly. Rourke leaned closer, his voice a knife's edge. "No, Miller was disposable. You are the target. Because if they can break you, if they can own you, they'll have everything they need." The SUV slowed, pulling off into a desolate warehouse lot. The headlights swept across rusted steel doors, broken windows, a hollow space where the city forgot itself. The driver killed the engine. The locks clicked again. Rourke opened his door, the cold night rushing in. He looked back at her with something that almost resembled sorrow. "This is where you learn what they've made of me." Rourke was about to reveal the price he paid for betraying the Shadow Division and what he had become in their hands. The warehouse swallowed him whole. Its steel doors groaned as they shut, sealing off the night and trapping the echoes inside. Dim light bulbs dangled from the rafters, flickering in and out like failing heartbeats. The air smelled of rust, oil, and secrets too heavy to name. Marlowe's boots scuffed against the concrete floor as the suited men pushed her forward. Rourke walked ahead, calm, deliberate, his silhouette sharp against the fractured light. She wanted to hate him, wanted to scream, but her training held her tongue. Silence. Always silence. That was her weapon. They stopped near the center of the warehouse, where a metal table sat waiting. Not paperwork, not files, instruments, surgical, mechanical, tools of reshaping. Her stomach twisted. Rourke turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the weight in his eyes. It was the look of a man who had been dismantled and rebuilt. "They called it Project Sable," he said, his voice echoing against the walls. "A program buried so deep. Even the agency doesn't acknowledge it. They take agents who ask too many questions, who get too close to the truth, and they break them, strip them down to obedience." He lifted his sleeve, revealing the inside of his forearm. Etched into the skin were lines, scars that spiraled like circuitry. Not tattoos, not natural, something implanted. Marlowe's breath caught. "What did they do to you?" Rourke's jaw tightened. "They rewired me, enhanced reflexes, fast recall, stronger conditioning. They wanted me as their ghost. A tool, not a man." He looked away for the first time, as if the truth was heavier than her gaze. "But I fought it. I buried pieces of myself they couldn't touch. That's why I've been hiding. That's why they want me erased." Marlowe's pulse raced. The Rourke she had known, the partner, the friend, was still there, but buried under scars that weren't just on his skin. They were inside him, in every word, every breath. "They'll do the same to you," he said quietly. "That's why they set you up. To stop with Miller, the escalation. It was all staged. They're watching how far you'll bend before you break. You're not here to be rescued, Marlowe. You're here to be tested." Her chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to deny it, but her gut told her otherwise. The strange maneuvers of her last mission, the classified files she was denied, the shadows in her own agency's halls. It all led here. The suited men stepped closer, their gloves catching the dim light. One of them reached the table, pulling free a syringe filled with liquid too dark to be medicine. Rourke's voice dropped to a whisper. "This is the price of the truth, and you only survive it if you stop fighting." For the first time, Marlowe felt something colder than fear, doubt, because she couldn't tell if Rourke was warning her or preparing her for the same fate. The syringe gleamed under the light, inches from her arm, as Rourke stood between betrayal and salvation. The needle glinted under the warehouse lights, its shadow stretching long across the concrete floor. The liquid inside seemed to pulse, alive, as if it knew the devastation it carried. The suited man stepped forward, syringe steady, his movements cold and precise. Marlowe's instinct screamed, every muscle ready to break free, but the cuffs dug into her wrists like shackles carved from silence. Rourke raised his hand. The man froze, the needle hovering inches from her skin. "She deserves to choose," Rourke said, his voice low, steady, but carrying an edge sharp enough to slice steel. The suited man frowned, confused, but obeyed. The needle stopped. Marlowe's heart hammered in her chest. She sees a sliver of time Rourke had given her. "If this is a test," she said, locking her eyes on him, "then tell me what happens if I pass." Rourke stared at her, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he leaned closer. "If you pass, you stop being you. You become theirs." The word struck her harder than the cuffs, harder than the thread of a needle. She swallowed, fighting to steady her breath. "And if I fail?" Rourke's silence was the answer. The man with the syringe shifted impatiently. "We don't have time." Rourke's eyes softened, just for a moment. A crack in his armor. "Marlowe, listen to me. They'll strip away everything you are. Your memories, your will, your choices. You'll be another ghost in their army. But if you resist, if you fight, you may not survive the night." The air between them thickened. She remembered Damascus, the rooftop extraction, Rourke's hand pulling her back from the edge. He'd saved her life once. But now he was offering her a choice between erasure and death. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with defiance. "Then I'll die as myself." The word stunned him. For a heartbeat, Rourke's mask cracked. She saw the man she once knew, proud, human, still hers, somewhere beneath the scars. But the suited men didn't share that humanity. One of them lunged, seizing her arm, pressing it down against the table. The other steadied the syringe, its point kissing her skin. Marlowe thrashed, muscles straining, but the cuffs cut deeper, blood seeping against her wrists. The needle pressed harder, breaking the first layer of flesh, and then chaos. The warehouse doors exploded inward, a blinding flood of light, and a roar of engines tearing the silence apart. Tires screeched, commands barked, dozens of voices, armed and urgent, a strike team. The suited men recoiled, dragging Marlowe back. Rourke spun toward the entrance, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he hadn't drawn in years. Through the floodlights, she caught a glimpse of patches on the strike team's gear. Not agency, not the warehouse erupted in chaos. Floodlights burned white scars across the darkness, slicing through the smoke and dust. Shadows darted, shouts collided, boots thundered against concrete. The strike team poured in like a black tide, rifles raised, voices sharp with precision. "Move, move, hands where we can see them." The suited men shoved Marlowe toward the table, one hand still gripping the syringe. She twisted, fighting against steel cuffs, wrists raw and bleeding. Rourke didn't move at first. He stood in the eye of the storm, his face caught between two wars, the one raging inside him, and the one exploding around them. "Rourke," she shouted over the noise, "choose your side." For a moment, she saw the boyish flicker in his eyes, the partner who once pulled her from rubble in Aleppo, who laughed with her over lukewarm rations. Then it was gone, replaced by the steel mass Project Sable had welded into him. The strike team closed in. Their leader barked, "Target secured. Extract the woman." Marlowe froze. Target secured. Extract. Their sights weren't on Rourke. They were on her. One of the suited men snarled, shoving the syringe harder against her arm. "Do it now." Rourke snapped, in one blur of motion. He knocked the syringe from the man's hand, glass shattering against concrete. The liquid bled across the floor, sizzling faintly as if it carried poison. The strike team's rifles pivoted instantly, barrels locking onto Rourke. "Stand down." He raised his hand slowly, but his eyes stayed fixed on Marlowe. "Run." He mouthed, her pulse roared in her ears. The suited men lunged, and the strike team opened fire. Gunfire ripped the air apart, bullets sparking against steel beams. The warehouse shook with violence, the stench of gunpowder choking the space. Rourke shoved her to the ground, shielding her with his body as rounds ricocheted around them. She felt his weight, the heat of him, the sharpest of pain as one bullet found its mark. He didn't cry out. He never did. The strike team closed in, seizing Marlowe by the arms, dragging her upright. Her vision blurred with smoke and panic, her chest heaving. Rourke lay on the floor, blood blooming across his shirt like a spreading shadow. His eyes locked onto hers, steady, burning, even as life slipped from him. "Find the truth," he rasped, each word carved in the edge of death. "Don't let them own you. Before she could reach him, before she could answer, the strike team yanked her away. The last thing she saw was Rourke's hand, twitching once, then still. The warehouse fell behind them, swallowed in fire as explosives detonated, erasing every trace of what happened inside. The SUV doors slammed again, trapping her in steel and silence. But this time, it wasn't Rourke across from her. It was strangers, another set of watchers. As the vehicle sped into the night, Marlowe's wrist bled, her mind reeling, her heart torn raw. She didn't know who had her now or what they wanted. But one truth cut through the chaos like a blade. She was no longer just an agent. She was a weapon everyone wanted to claim. She should never have come back. The partner she once trusted now stood before her alive, dangerous, and holding secrets that could shatter everything she thought she knew. The SUV's interior hummed with a low growl of its engine, but inside, the silence was suffocating. Marlowe sat between the two suited men, her wrists bound with a thin strip of flex cuff that bit into her skin. Rourke occupied the passenger seat, his profile sharp against the glow of the dashboard. Every so often, his eyes flicked to the side mirror, scanning the shadows that trailed him. It wasn't paranoia, it was habit. Marlowe remembered that about him. He never stopped calculating. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you know why Miller stopped you?" Her jaw tightened. "Because he thought he could." A humorless chuckle slipped from Rourke's lips. Not quite. Miller wasn't acting alone. He was fed your plate number. Someone wanted you pulled over, wanted the situation to escalate. He was just the leash. You were the bait. The word sank deep, colder than the cuffs around her wrists. Bait for what? Rourke turned, his eyes locking with hers. For me. The SUV jolted slightly as the driver hit pothole, but Marlowe barely felt it. Her heart hammered too loud. "You let them use me to drag you out?" Rourke's face hardened. "I didn't let them. They're already 5 steps ahead. They always are. That's why I had to disappear." Her voice cracked, the first fissure in her composure. "Disappear and let me believe you were dead?" The silence that followed was heavy, a silence that reeked of guilt. Rourke finally exhaled, slow, controlled. "If you'd known the truth, you'd be in the ground with me." The driver spoke up for the first time, his voice flat. 5 minutes. Rourke nodded but didn't break her gaze. "Marlowe, the agency you serve, it doesn't exist the way you think. There's a shadow division, older than Langley itself, buried under redactions and sealed directives. They decide who lives, who dies, which wars are fought, and which lies keep the world spinning. I crossed them once. That's why I vanished." Her throat went dry. She'd heard rumors, whispers in classified briefings, files that ended in abrupt black bars. She thought they were myths, scare tactics to keep agents in line. But Rourke's eyes told her they weren't myths. They were chains. "You're saying Miller was their pawn," she said quietly. Rourke leaned closer, his voice a knife's edge. "No, Miller was disposable. You are the target. Because if they can break you, if they can own you, they'll have everything they need." The SUV slowed, pulling off into a desolate warehouse lot. The headlights swept across rusted steel doors, broken windows, a hollow space where the city forgot itself. The driver killed the engine. The locks clicked again. Rourke opened his door, the cold night rushing in. He looked back at her with something that almost resembled sorrow. "This is where you learn what they've made of me." Rourke was about to reveal the price he paid for betraying the Shadow Division and what he had become in their hands. The warehouse swallowed him whole. Its steel doors groaned as they shut, sealing off the night and trapping the echoes inside. Dim light bulbs dangled from the rafters, flickering in and out like failing heartbeats. The air smelled of rust, oil, and secrets too heavy to name. Marlowe's boots scuffed against the concrete floor as the suited men pushed her forward. Rourke walked ahead, calm, deliberate, his silhouette sharp against the fractured light. She wanted to hate him, wanted to scream, but her training held her tongue. Silence. Always silence. That was her weapon. They stopped near the center of the warehouse, where a metal table sat waiting. Not paperwork. Not files. Instruments. Surgical, mechanical. Tools of reshaping. Her stomach twisted. Rourke turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the weight in his eyes. It was the look of a man who had been dismantled and rebuilt. "They called it Project Sable," he said, his voice echoing against the walls. "A program buried so deep. Even the agency does acknowledge it. They take agents who ask too many questions, who get too close to the truth, and they break them, strip them down to obedience." He lifted his sleeve, revealing the inside of his forearm, etched into the skin with lines, scars that spiraled like circuitry. Not tattoos, not natural, something implanted. Marlowe's breath caught. "What did they do to you?" Rourke's jaw tightened. "They rewired me. Enhanced reflexes, fast recall, stronger conditioning. They wanted me as their ghost. A tool, not a man." He looked away for the first time, as if the truth was heavier than her gaze. "But I fought it. I buried pieces of myself they couldn't touch. That's why I've been hiding. That's why they want me erased." Marlowe's pulse raced. The Rourke she had known, the partner, the friend, was still there, but buried under scars that weren't just on his skin. They were inside him, in every word, every breath. "They'll do the same to you," he said quietly. "That's why they set you up. To stop with Miller, the escalation. It was all staged. They're watching how far you'll bend before you break. You're not here to be rescued, Marlowe. You're here to be tested." Her chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to deny it, but her gut told her otherwise. The strange maneuvers of her last mission, the classified files she was denied, the shadows in her own agency's halls. It all led here. The suited men stepped closer, their gloves catching the dim light. One of them reached the table, pulling free a syringe filled with liquid too dark to be medicine. Rourke's voice dropped to a whisper. "This is the price of the truth, and you only survive it if you stop fighting." For the first time, Marlowe felt something colder than fear, doubt, because she couldn't tell if Rourke was warning her or preparing her for the same fate. The syringe gleamed under the light, inches from her arm, as Rourke stood between betrayal and salvation. The needle glinted under the warehouse lights, its shadow stretching long across the concrete floor. The liquid inside seemed to pulse, alive, as if it knew the devastation it carried. The suited man stepped forward, syringe steady, his movements cold and precise. Marlowe's instinct screamed, every muscle ready to break free, but the cuffs dug into her wrists like shackles carved from silence. Rourke raised his hand. The man froze, the needle hovering inches from her skin. "She deserves to choose," Rourke said, his voice low, steady, but carrying an edge sharp enough to slice steel. The suited man frowned, confused, but obeyed. The needle stopped. Marlowe's heart hammered in her chest. She seized a sliver of time Rourke had given her. "If this is a test," she said, locking her eyes on him, "then tell me what happens if I pass." Rourke stared at her, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he leaned closer. "If you pass, you stop being you. You become theirs." The word struck her harder than the cuffs, harder than the thread of a needle. She swallowed, fighting to steady her breath. "And if I fail?" Rourke's silence was the answer. The man with the syringe shifted impatiently. "We don't have time." Rourke's eyes softened, just for a moment. A crack in his armor. "Marlowe, listen to me. They'll strip away everything you are. Your memories, your will, your choices. You'll be another ghost in their army. But if you resist, if you fight, you may not survive the night." The air between them thickened. She remembered Damascus, the rooftop extraction, Rourke's hand pulling her back from the edge. He'd saved her life once. But now he was offering her a choice between erasure and death. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with defiance. "Then I'll die as myself." The word stunned him. For a heartbeat, Rourke's mask cracked. She saw the man she once knew, proud, human, still hers, somewhere beneath the scars. But the suited men didn't share that humanity. One of them lunged, seizing her arm, pressing it down against the table. The other steadied the syringe, its point kissing her skin. Marlowe thrashed, muscles straining, but the cuffs cut deeper, blood seeping against her wrists. The needle pressed harder, breaking the first layer of flesh, and And then, chaos. The warehouse doors exploded inward, a blinding flood of light, and the roar of engines tearing the silence apart. Tires screeched. Commands barked. Dozens of voices, armed and urgent. A strike team. The suited men recoiled, dragging Marlowe back. Rourke spun toward the entrance, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he hadn't drawn in years. Through the floodlights, she caught a glimpse of patches on the strike team's gear. Not agency. Not the warehouse erupted in chaos. Floodlights burned white scars across the darkness, slicing through the smoke and dust. Shadows darted, shouts collided, boots thundered against concrete. The strike team poured in like a black tide, rifles raised, voices sharp with precision. Move, move, hands where we can see them. The suited men shoved Marlowe toward the table, one hand still gripping the syringe. She twisted, fighting against steel cuffs, wrists raw and bleeding. Rourke didn't move at first. He stood in the eye of the storm, his face caught between two wars, the one raging inside him, the one exploding around him. "Rourke," she shouted over the noise. "Choose your side." For a moment, she saw the boyish flicker in his eyes, the partner who once pulled her from rubble in Aleppo, who laughed with her over lukewarm rations. Then it was gone, replaced by the steel mass Project Sable had welded into him. The strike team closed in. Their leader barked, "Target secured. Extract the woman." Marlowe froze. Target secured. Extract. Their sights weren't on Rourke. They were on her. One of the suited men snarled, shoving the syringe harder against her arm. "Do it now." Rourke snapped. In one blur of motion, he knocked the syringe from the man's hand, glass shattering against concrete. The liquid bled across the floor, sizzling faintly as if it carried poison. The strike team's rifles pivoted instantly, barrels locking onto Rourke. "Stand down." He raised his hand slowly, but his eyes stayed fixed on Marlowe. "Run," he mouthed. Her pulse roared in her ears. The suited men lunged, and the strike team opened fire. Gunfire ripped the air apart, bullets sparking against steel beams. The warehouse shook with violence, the stench of gunpowder choking the space. Rourke shoved her to the ground, shielding her with his body as rounds ricocheted around them. She felt his weight, the heat of him, the sharpest of pain as one bullet found its mark. He didn't cry out. He never did. The strike team closed in, seizing Marlowe by the arm, dragging her upright. Her vision blurred with smoke and panic, her chest heaving. Rourke lay on the floor, blood blooming across his shirt like a spreading shadow. His eyes locked onto hers, steady, burning, even as life slipped from him. "Find the truth," he rasped, each word carved from the edge of death. "Don't let them own you." Before she could reach him, before she could answer, the strike team yanked her away. The last thing she saw was Rourke's hand, twitching once, then still. The warehouse fell behind them, swallowed in fire as explosives detonated, erasing every trace of what happened inside. The SUV doors slammed again, trapping her in steel and silence. But this time, it wasn't Rourke across from her. It was strangers, another set of watchers. As the vehicle sped into the night, Marlowe's wrist bled, her mind reeling, her heart torn raw. She didn't know who had her now or what they wanted. But one truth cut through the chaos like a blade. She was no longer just an agent. She was a weapon everyone wanted to claim.